Hey, hi everybody. Welcome to the OLM Dev community meeting, and we have started that meeting. But but I forgot to start the recording, so starting now. Let me share my screen. And we're talking about Bryce is a topic about SIG meetings immediately after this one. So Bryce, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, just as we've talked about, standing up a SIG for the supporting tools around OLM, more specifically OLM v1. Um, I've gone ahead and created the meeting. It's a Google meeting. It should be open for everybody to join, and the notes document there is what we'll be using as the agenda doc. So it's going to be agenda driven and going to be more informal. So we'll just kind of go to that meeting. Anybody who shows up, and we'll talk about the things that are on the agenda. Um, so yeah, if you're interested in getting in on the ground floor of building some OLM support, some supporting tools for OLM like clients, dev tooling, stuff like that, this would be a good meeting for folks interested in that. So like I said, it's immediately after this one. So once this call ends, um, it's noon to 1 Eastern. Um, so yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Bryce. As part of this meeting, we go through our V1 board. So somehow I missed that as well. So let's go there. Okay. So we just going through the done column and everything looks good to me. These are ready for review. Let's go through one by one. I think the PR is mostly ready. This code API diff is failing for this one.
That's not uncommon when we're making changes to APIs. So that should be fine in many of these.
Okay, so I just need basically LGTM and then it should be good to merge. Or do we need to, so we need to override this, right? Override this failure.
It's not required, so it's just
Okay,
informative.
okay, so
Right,
we
but
just
there's
need a,
two failing. So what's the other failure? Oh, coverage. Okay.
Yeah, it was failing sanity, but it looks like there was just a push from when I last looked about an hour ago or so.
so is it the code coverage is also optional? No, it's also optional, right? These are only required things
Yeah, I
over
don't know
here.
why. Um, I feel like the project code cov thing has that 0.4% decrease every now and then. I wouldn't expect this PR to change code coverage at all because we're literally just changing the
Yeah.
names of fields. So I feel like there's something with code cov that just isn't quite right. So yeah, that one's
Mo
up.
Most often it is due to um, conditions which we sometimes hit with and sometimes we don't hit, like in end-to-end tests, for example. So it can be like flakiness in coverage, and I think small percentage like this can be ignored.
Yeah, so essentially we're setting a high water mark and then it complains whenever we never hit that high water mark.
Um, Yeah, I would say that yes. I try to, from time to time, look into those and change tests so that we always hit or always do not hit certain conditions in coverage, but it's not always possible. And sometimes it just requires a lot of work, a lot of redoing of E2Es.
Yeah.
So it's not worth it. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's fine if the project coverage decreases a little bit. But I think the code cover usually is like, at least maybe it's configurable somehow. We can probably look into that. But I think even if it's tiny percentage decrease for the project, it will indicate it.
Yep. No, I think it's all good.
And another thing to mention is that it is possible to view the diff between the last project coverage and the current one. So if it fails like this, it's a good idea to check if it's really a flake or in coverage or not, especially if it's a bigger percentage. But yeah, you can click on View Full Report in CodeCov.
Yeah, it is not hitting these conditions. And that's what he's saying.
Anyway, I think let's not probably
Yeah, we
spend
can
time
talk
in
it.
this
Yep, we can
here.
talk about it
But
later.
yeah.
Yeah, if it's a fractional percentage, we probably don't need to worry about it. If it's a whole number, then we should worry about it.
Right. So moving forward, the next PR we're looking into is I think Nico's PR. Trying to see. Some reason it's still showing in draft, work in progress. I think probably Nico probably forgot to remove it, the draft thing.
It's not passing tests, so it's still needs some updates.
Yeah,
I think it's because 377 that was linked in the comment there on the bottom needs to go in first, and then this would be rebased. So
but
for
still
context,
needed LGTM, right?
yeah, I think so. But so for context, I think this is making it so that we can remove the insecure skip TLS verify field and still ping the ETE test registry because we trust the certificates.
Cool. Moving to the next one. This is a doc peer review for this one, 1232. I think it has got reviews. Yeah, so probably should be in a good place to add LGTM now because it looks like Taylor has already pushed an update 1 hour back.
You can take another look at it.
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. Taking a look into our next PRs, which I think Ankita has sent an update. The 3 PRs on this. Actually, 1 PR for all the 3 issues.
Yeah, I have yet to push the update on that. I'll have that shortly.
Okay, cool. I think so. Ankita is working on it. So I think we should be fine, right? We don't move the cards to implementing when review is going on. So I think it's fine to stay in review. Going to the next one, another doc, which is Pair. I think send a PR on this. It's already got a bunch of reviews from Bryce. So we're fine. So Per needs to update this now. This is actually his margin closed, so we can move it to done section. Last one is API reference, catalog API reference, and the PR is already up. And okay, this is not reviewed yet, but I'm assuming this is very similar to the API reference generation we had for operator controller. So it should be relatively straightforward to review and merge. Okay, so on the implementing section, we have three cards. One is the bug cache catalog contents are not cleaned up when catalog is deleted, assigned to Mikolai. Mikolai, do you have any update on this one?
Yeah, I will come back full time on this tomorrow. But yeah, I was just looking into this in the background. I think I found
Okay.
another bug, which probably doesn't help very much, but here we are in catalog D. But yeah, I will be looking more into this starting tomorrow.
I think you mentioned about that new bug also in the channel, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I think I just saw that bug, Nikolai, that you're talking about. I think the PR that Onik stood up for the status conditions that Ankita is also going to be contributing to, I think that will resolve that bug. Because I
Do
think
you remember the number of this one? Or do you have a link
whatever
handy?
the PR is for the catalog D 363 and catalog D 365 issues, I can try to find that PR number.
Thanks.
It's 379 for catalog D. Because I think Onik had called that same bug out as part of implementing some tests.
Cool. The next one is actually assigned to me. I'm working on this one. I'm going through existing docs, and I found I put up the question in the OLM Dev Slack channel about what exactly we need to document as part of this. So my current understanding is we need to only just put some text around how cluster extension and catalog D and FBC probably related, maybe not, because we already have a components page. And so let's find out what exactly we need to document as part of this. I just started a thread probably 25 minutes back. Let's take a look.
Isn't this mostly about creating an architecture diagram?
Yeah, so it was actually about architecture diagram. Then I think, thought probably we need an architecture document also. And here we are.
Well, there's some prior art that talks about the components, but it doesn't go into it doesn't list the interactions specifically. It's just a very, glancing overview.
Yeah, so that's the part probably. There's not much, but I think that's the part we can just add the interactions between components.
Yeah, I personally think that a diagram here makes a lot of sense, like just to visualize all the interactions, because in the rest of our documentation, like in order to do certain things, you're going to have to interact with all the different pieces anyways. So I think like having a high level diagram and then leaving the rest of understanding how you actually use those interactions for the rest of the documentation is probably good here.
Cool. And move to the next one, which is derive minimal service account needed to install a bundle. This is actually under review, so I'm moving it here.
Yeah.
Rashmi, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly ready, but I'll have it ready for review tomorrow. I've got most of the things in now. I just have to clean it up and yeah, just prepare it for review. If you could, yeah, just see the MD version. If largely does it look okay? Is there some more content we want to put? Otherwise, I'll progress with just cleaning this up.
I think thanks Rashmi. I think the PR is not linked somehow, right? Because your PR is here, I can see.
The third one.
Third one, yeah. If you add a text here in the commit fixes when there are multiple commits, I probably gonna merge them
Okay.
together, right? There are multiple commits which you probably need to merge them together, and if you mention it fixes that issue, then it automatically get linked to that issue, and then
Okay, got it. I'll do that. Yeah.
for
Sure.
now,
It'll automatically squash the commits when it merges.
Yeah.
So
I think the multiple commits is all right? Because we can always squash and merge. But I'll link it to the issue. That will show the PR in the original issue.
yeah, I'm just putting a comment in also in case somebody wants to find out. Thanks, Rashmi. So then we have this card, which is docs OLM V1 limitations. Michael, are you working on these ones? Should it be on? No.
It's implementing. Yeah, I'm working on it. It's just I can't move cards.
Okay, cool. And then these cards are actually we're waiting for them to finish everything else. Then you can do it.
I think 1155, that first one, I think Pear has a PR up for.
Yeah, and then we have added actually a hold on this.
Yeah, so I would say you could probably put it under implementing or something like that, because it'll probably need some rebases, and then we can assign that issue to Pear.
Okay.
The rest of those look like they're fine.
Yeah.
I do have one of those issues that I just added yesterday after our conversation with Joe that might make sense for us to talk about a little bit more in depth.
Which is that card?
1239, the bottom one.
Right. So maybe I can copy it and put it on our agenda, right?
Sure.
Cool. So let's go back to our notes. Yeah, for some reason I cannot. So Raj, do you want to yeah, we are done with our 1.0 check-in. So we can go back to our discussion topics now. Bryce, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So Joe and I were talking yesterday and thinking through like what our public API actually looks like and what we can or can't break after we go V1.0. So some areas that we've thought about so far are CRDs. So we're obviously stabilizing that API or our CRDs to be V1, and we kind of know what that means. Some areas that I think we had some open questions is like our CLI and our manifests. Like, are the flags that are in the CLI considered part of our public API? Like, if we go V1 with like we release OLM 1.0.0 and we decide that we're gonna go change a CLI flag, is that a breaking change? If it is, maybe we need to make sure we go through all our CLI flags and make sure they're the way we want them. The same goes for our manifests. Is there any manifests that are public that we want to consider as public APIs? I think Joe and I talked about potentially like services, maybe removing services or changing the number of services that we're deploying and things like that might be considered a breaking change from a user perspective. And then obviously any Go libraries that we're exporting. So just I put this in as 1.0. I put it in the proposed release blockers just because I think that it's probably a worthwhile question for us to be asking and going back through operator controller and catalog D with a fine tooth comb and say, okay, these are all the areas that we think that if we make a change could be considered breaking. So we need to be cautious about that and make sure we evaluate things and see if we need to make any changes to them before we do a 1.0 release.
Do we want to put any checks from a CI like pre-submit CI point of view that these areas if they need to if any changes in these directories it needs to get it will get flagged somehow, or is it just mostly for awareness?
What I think we should do here is two things. Mainly the first thing is the outcome of this ticket I expect would be a definition of what our public API is and what it isn't, basically. So like our CRDs and our Go libraries are part of our public API, and we write this down in documentation somewhere. However, and I'm just making this up. However, our CLI is subject to change and is not part of our public API. And some aspects of our manifests, like maybe we'll go from 3 services down to 1 service, or we'll change the name of our deployment. Like maybe we say that those things are not part of our public API and shouldn't be dependent on. So I think the outcome is like, let's write down an exhaustive declaration of what our public API is. Once we do that, then we can get to your question, Lala, which is, cool, can we validate that and make sure that we don't break it? But I don't think doing those validations is part of this blocker work.
So do you want to go through one by one? So about CRDs, I think CRDs by default considered as breaking change if we change it.
I don't think we need to go through all those right now. I think this is just unless Bryce, you were hoping to.
Oh no, I just wanted to bring it up and
Okay.
like for folks to be that are interested in having that conversation, like this issue is a good place that we can kind of have that conversation, iron some stuff out and make some decisions.
Okay. Cool. So moving to the next topic, unless somebody has anything else for the topic. Cool. Moving to the next topic, which is our V1 docs. So we have been working on the V1 docs. We are merging them as Markdown files. We had some internal discussion about some folks about what we expect these docs to be when 1.0 goes out, but I think I feel there is not a strong consensus. I guess people have more or less agree to some of the things. So just wanted to discuss this in this call and make sure that we kind of agree on what state we want our docs when we release 1.0, upstream 1.0, because we're pretty close to releasing upstream 1.0. Most of the cards are mostly done. Only the API review is once the API review is done, and some few things which is waiting on those API reviews are done, then we should be able to cut upstream release. So the question is, for V0 we had Netlify framework which we used to publish those docs. V1 docs we haven't gone through that route. We can go through that route. There are some challenges probably because we use Netlify free subscription, and we don't know if that will support these extra docs. Or we can use GitHub pages to publish this. We already have currently with the V1, I actually has that page open somewhere. For V1 docs, we already have kind of publishing in a place. I think this is the one, right? Yeah, this is the place. We're already publishing the V1 docs. It's the home. So do you want to continue with this page and or are we okay with just having the markdown files as part of 1.0 release? I think who wants to go next? What do you guys think? Pear was giving a concise expectation of what he thinks would be a good idea when we're discussing. Pear, do you want to add it here? I'm not
I
sure
think
if
Per couldn't join us today.
okay. So Joe, I think Joe also agreeing. Joe and Michael, probably you guys are the best person to now represent Pear, right?
Yeah, go
Do you
ahead.
want me? Do you want me to give a quick summary, Joe?
Sure.
Okay. So I think so. There's a little bit of nuance to what you said at first, Lala. Is actually I would say that we're using Hugo to publish our docs for Operator SDK and V0, and that Netlify is the build and deployment system.
You go to
And
publish. Sorry, Michael, can you come again, please?
yeah, Hugo is like the publishing platform.
Okay.
So that's what converts the markdown into HTML and creates the structure and the information architecture for the site.
That's for SDK and V0.
And V0, correct.
Not for V1.
Not for V1. And Netlify is the build and deployment tool. Netlify has a free tier for open source projects. They have changed some policies in the past around this. It might change at some point, but I think the biggest. I'll give you a chance to catch up. Sorry. In the beginning, they were kind of the only game in town in terms of doing some of this like documentation pipeline automation, but there are competitors out there, including GitHub Pages. But there's a lot of, I mean, really, you can actually just even create your own GitHub actions because basically you can create a container and run, like MK docs or Hugo or whatever in that sort of GitHub actions build and generate your docs. Right now so yeah, there are other services out there, but it's also the manual way to do it. I've gotten to work even if I'm not an engineer. I've gotten it to work even if I don't understand everything. So I think it shouldn't be too difficult to do. But really the build is independent of the documentation tooling. And the build and deployment part of the documentation pipeline is something that I think we could change later with little to no customer impact. Maybe there would be there would be an hour or something where some redirects or things like that aren't working if we were to completely sort of move away from Netlify for V0 and SDK. But a lot of those changes are a lot faster than they used to be. So the reason why I mention that is I think that at some point it will become important to figure out what to do with V0 and the SDK docs and to how they're going to relate to the V1 docs, especially as it relates to probably the most important thing would be FBC and OPM. But I think that those questions, especially the questions around Netlify, the Netlify part is really just about how we deploy the docs, build and deploy the docs. Like, it's not gonna, it doesn't really have customer impact or like direct customer impact. I think short term we might want to get some more Netlify admins because Netlify is owned by, I think is still owned by Austin, like as the main administrator. So we probably want to update that. But yeah, I would kind of view a lot of that as just kind of some technical debt that we don't necessarily need to address at this moment. And I'm at there's a little bit more, but Joe, if you want to go ahead at a bit of a stopping point.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to echo what you said right there at the end, which I think that, and this is also echoing, I think, what Para's saying, which is, I think all of this Netlify versus SDK and V0 docs and what do we do with our domain and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think all of that is just a separate epic. I think it's valuable. I don't think it's part of what we're trying to do for our 1.0.0 docs. And I think it's just a different set of work. So in my mind, the breakdown is, do we have the content in markdown form organized according to what the v1.0.0 docs epic lays out? If yes, we're done with that epic. The second epic is, do we have that hosted on a nice website? If not, let's go do that. And then the third epic is, okay, how do we've got SDK, we've got OLM v0, we've got OLM v1 docs all out in the ether in different places. What are we going to do about that? And so I think there's really three epics here. And we can just ignore epics 2 and 3 for right now.
Yeah, and I think that it would be helpful maybe before we do 2 and 3 to do like, I think there might be some analytics set up for V0 and SDK, so it might be good to do like a content audit to like look like what are the things that are getting the most traffic, what is relevant, what are the things we can maybe just not even worry about. Like if, Joey, we talked about redirects, like if there's swatches of content that are just not very important, maybe we don't need to worry about the redirects as much for those. But yeah, again, I think part of that is like that examination of where everything lives and kind of have, I think that all that can be pushed out.
So just to confirm, so you said three epics. One is obviously writing the markdown files. The second one is the effort around publishing the docs.
The second one in my mind is, can we get the OLM v1 docs published on a domain somewhere that we are happy with? And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to consider how do we integrate with the rest of our existing legacy docs, which is the third epic.
Yeah. So I was right. So obviously publishing is the second epic, and then how do we position V1 docs along with V0 and SDK? I think the third epic, right?
Yeah, that's my opinion.
So I think what we're hearing, right? The suggestion, for V1.0 release is like we're saying that we having just markdown files should be good enough for us, and then we can look into these two things, like how do we publish them, and that can be 1 or 2 persons job, just because we would have existing markdown files. So we probably have to depending on what platform we use to convert them into HTML and then publish it. We probably have to fix the rendering. We probably have to change a few things here and there, but it's not like going to be the whole team's effort. Creating the content for the features we have for V1 is actually the bigger effort. And we are saying that, is it okay if I think I'm just asking the question, which I actually completely agree that for 1.0, if we have nice markdown files, that should be good enough for us to actually release 1.0. So anybody, what do you guys think?
And I will add that part of my plan is that after I have a downstream deadline, but everything in the drafts folder, I'm planning on cleaning up and moving over to the main GitHub Pages site. So that will all be, whether or not I can hit, depending on when the 1.0.0 release happens and other commitments, it either shortly after but yeah, so we will have things published on the GitHub Pages site, not just in GitHub. So it will be, we have that operator framework.github pages / operator controller URL, which is like nicely published documentation. It doesn't have our branding and things like that, but everything is formatted, and you're not just looking at the raw HTML in GitHub. It has navigation and things like that,
And
like a table of contents.
Yeah, and what tooling is that, Michael?
That is MK Docs material, which I find to be a bit simpler and a bit more powerful than Hugo. It was also recommended by Andy when he was a staff engineer on the team. In terms of the layout, and this is just sort of the default formatting, so we haven't put any effort into customizing this at all. But it is the good thing about it is that it is powerful, and that you can in terms of partners at IBM and Red Hat, there are ways to use the MK Docs material theme to transfer things to DITA, which is what both Red Hat and IBM are transitioning to for their downstream docs. So in terms of the productization and like upstream into downstream, that is a good case for MK Docs material over Hugo in terms of our partnerships. But it's mostly just Markdown with some extra formatting and tooling on top of it.
Okay. So I think looks like let's see if anybody wants to add anything. Otherwise, I think the general consensus is for 1.0 having this markdown files should be good. And then once Michael gets some cycles, he will try to move those files out of drafts to the place where the MK Docs can use it to publish it. So for 1.0, are we saying that we will publish them in current MK Docs format? We'll actually move them out of drafts, and that's 1.0 goal, or is it okay to also have them in draft folder as well?
My expectation, again, looking at the epic, is that we have a structure and hierarchy, which is laid out in the epic. And what I think is the plan, and I think what I saw Per say is we're going to get them all into the drafts and then essentially do what Michael was saying that he would do, but we can also do it too if Michael's busy. Collect all those drafts up and put them in a place that is structured. And since we already have the scaffolding around getting that stuff published to that GitHub.io website, might as well put it there so that it shows up on that GitHub.io website. So I guess my point is, I don't think there's any work, and Michael, you correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but
Yep.
my assumption is I don't think there's any work whatsoever related to setting up the make docs builds or getting GitHub pages publishing or anything like that that we need to do. That's all there. It's all working. It's fine. All we have to do is put files in the right place in the repo for that stuff to get picked up.
Yeah, there's a topic map you have to adjust, but no matter how busy I am, I could create a topic map and we could have a structure in an afternoon. Like that's a, 5-line PR. So
Got it.
and the thing is that we can change it, right? And that's, we don't have to, we're still in the, we could change the format of that at any point. So it
Okay.
won't be difficult. I'm also happy to like maybe start a brief or like kind of talk about like the content plan for the going forward. I'm happy to lead that and say, I can start on that hopefully in mid-October, but I'm happy to drive that.
Okay. So I think today's basically, I mentioned in the goal, so goal for 1.0, I mentioned it here. So if you guys, anybody wants to, you don't agree with this one and talk about it more, please feel free to, start a thread or something or bring it to the meeting. You can talk about it. So moving to the next one, which is happened here. Something happened and I changed my mouse. Okay. So the roadmap check-in, I don't think we need this, right? Because we have gone through our 1.0 board. But I think just want to cross-check that everything is in line with what we have been doing till now. So these epics you have a need docs column. I think this one, this is done, I think we need to close this one. Going to the next. What do we do with this epic? I think the Helm chart code kind of covers some of it. So do we need a docs for this one?
I think what we said is that what we need here is a doc that basically lays out the concept of single cluster extension ownership of objects. And then we don't really need to get into this is implemented in Helm versus this is implemented in a validating webhook. Like that's implementation details. I think what we wanted here was to plainly state what the concept is so that users know and our future selves know that's what our design intent is.
Yeah, so we need to create a doc card and then attach so that it shows up in our things to track in 1.0.
Yeah.
I can do that after this meeting. And then we have another epic. And this is already, I think, done.
Yeah, I think you can move that one.
Yeah, so yeah, I said done, right?
Yep.
So if I refresh this one, yeah, only 2 epics are here. And I'm just going through them. Yeah. We haven't checked this one for some time now. Yeah, which is same as what we've seen in the past.
Let's check that off.
Yep.
Yes. So there is proposed release blockers. What is our public API?
Yep, I think that should be part of our, that should be an approved blocker in my opinion. I think that probably ends up, like you said there, probably ends up getting turned into documentation, but we need to have the discussion in order to decide what we're going to write.
Right, anybody feels otherwise?
I don't want to this is just a thought about how we frame the documentation, but do we want to talk about like frame it around support? Like just like to have a user focus around these are the contract of what we're not going to break, like and this is what does that make sense?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
The upstream story on support is a little funny because it's like we don't support anything here technically,
Right,
but we should have, we Red Hat don't support, but it would be good for us to have we, the upstream community, will do X.
Right. Yeah. Support's probably the wrong word, but
Yeah, it's like what is the expected behavior and what is not. Like, in terms of defining some information so that we just can understand, okay, here is what they want us to use the stuff, like the way
It is, yeah, it's like the versioning strategy, basically. Like when we do this breaking change, here's which version we will bump. If we do this other breaking change, we don't consider that part of our public API, so we're not going to bump a major version. Like writing those things down. And then it's not really about support, it's just about like what people can expect.
There is one more epic about establish home for 1.0.0 Go APIs.
Bryce and Todd and I were talking about monorepos, and maybe Mikolai and Nico were there too. Can't remember. But anyway, there's a separate discussion where we so far have consensus among the group of people who are already talking that we're going to combine operator controller and catalog D. So Bryce created a doc for a brief. We haven't actually started writing anything in it, unless Bryce, you had a chance to do any of that yesterday. But I think the answer to this is probably dependent on how that goes, which is very likely that at the very least, all the Go APIs end up in one repo because we're thinking about making a mono repo. So we're very early on that because there's still not even a brief drafted, but there's been some Slack discussions going on.
So mono repo / API would be everything? Is that your thought?
Yeah. I think the main thing I can imagine that is probably not controversial is that catalog D and operator controller Go APIs will be in the same GitHub repository. Whether that is in a separate API repo, whether that's in a separate Go submodule, still TBD. But it seemed like there was consensus at least on let's put this stuff in the same repo at least.
Yeah, so just generically, it would be a single non-logic dependency, no code logic dependency, whether it's a separate repo or a submodule, right?
That would be the ultimate goal for APIs, at least. I think that's still part of that. Yeah. I think we probably need to experiment a little bit with what happens if we have APIs in one package and implementation stuff in another package, and some repo out there needs to import our APIs. Do the imports from those other unused packages have any effect? And if the answer is yes, then we may need to actually put it in a separate module. But I think the answer is no. I think it's actually based on what your import tree is. but we should check.
So things might change, right, in general, but do we expect people to actually import our library, the
Yeah,
sorry, the APIs?
I have a need for it
Yeah.
Okay.
for a long time, and I haven't started on any of that because I'm not picking up code dependencies.
Yeah, and also I guess the client tools also probably use our API.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, do you so Joe and Bryce, can you guys update this? Probably Joe, you are the better person to like update this Epic to kind of the refocus of this API about the upon the things we need to solve. And is it a blocker? I guess if you're doing a monorep, I think it's a blocker for 1.0, right?
I think this is a blocker regardless, because as soon as we decide or as soon as we release 1.0.0, wherever the APIs are, that's where they kind of have to stay.
Right.
But yes, I can put it. I think they're kind of separate epics, where this one is sort of going to be subsumed by the other, but I don't want to lose any of the context here because we've already had separate discussions about pros and cons of how to structure specifically the APIs. So it's essentially just a different facet of the larger discussion about how to organize our repos.
I just make sure that this is linked to the other one so we can follow both of them.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll make a new epic for proposal of a new mono repo and then link this to that. And then once we have a brief written, we'll put that up there too.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Did we think about doing this after 1.0 release, or is it something we really want to do before?
That gets into the question of all the public APIs. So it's like if our CLI and our manifests, if we consider those to be public APIs, then we can't, like, we need to decide whether it's going to be one binary or two binaries or one pod versus two pods, or, you know, all the different variations of what we consider to be something that's stable. So I think we need to sort of consider really what's our public API, where do our APIs live, and what's our repo structure, all in sort of one go prior to 1.0. And I think we can decide, like, if our public API discussion says, oh, our binaries and our CLIs are not part of our public API, then maybe that means we could do this afterwards. But it's like a large ball of wax that we have to sort of look at everything before we can release a 1.0 and know what our plan is.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And I think talk to you soon. Have a good day, evening, rest of your day. Talk to you soon.